us is still Moneyline with Nancy. Do you remember the song? Andrew wants to check out Nigeria Go Survive. If you don't remember, or perhaps you weren't even born that time, or just less refreshing your memory, take a listen.
Nigeria can survive if our leaders do them best, Andrew goes there to help, Nigeria can survive. Nigeria can survive. Africa can survive. My people can survive, Nigeria can survive. Nigeria can survive. Africa can survive. My people can survive, Nigeria can survive. Nigeria can survive. Africa can survive. My people can survive. Nigeria can survive. Nigeria can survive. Africa can survive. My people can survive. Nigeria can survive.
All right, Nigeria Go Survive, and from that time till now, Nigerians are still trying to survive. Whether or not it's a bit harder as economic hardship, cost of living crisis, and a lot of economic challenges, insecurity also, forcing many Nigerians to seek greener pastures and also to be secure elsewhere. My guest is joining me right now, Dr. Andrew Nevin. He is the former chief economist of PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC Nigeria. Good morning, Dr. Nevin, and thank you for joining us.
Morning, Nancy. It's great to be with you. Always great to be with Nancy on Moneyline.
Thank you very much, Doctor. We had to bring that song in because it's been many years, and I know that PwC did a report some time ago about Nigeria's brain exports. When I read the report, that was then. And for you today, would you still say that we are still exporting our brains out there, or this is a total case of brain drain? I mentioned earlier the NMA in 2022 said that 50 doctors leave every week. We've had about 57,000 nurses leave in the last 5 to 6 years. I can go on and on. So where are we right now in Nigeria? A lot of people are jackpying, are living in drones. So where are we right now? Hello, doctor, can you hear me? Okay, it seems the connection is frozen. Let's try to reconnect with Dr. Andrew Nevin again as we continue our discussion. Do stay.
Always been like that, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. From now going forward, it's bad. That's what I have to say. It's very bad, as in the cost of labor has not gone up. As a business person, the rate I charge for my jobs is the rate they are still paying me. It hasn't gone up. So it's actually detrimental for my business.
The condition of this country, everybody, we are getting tired, especially this issue of fuel. They increase fuel today, tomorrow they will increase the price, tomorrow they will increase the price. Where are we taking this money to? Them, they are our leaders. Where are they taking this money to? That they are taking this money from our pocket to their own pocket. Where are they taking it to? But still, they don't want us to rest in this country. It affects me badly. Like now, I'm working under somebody. What the amount that's supposed to fill this tank before, the person that he can't even buy up to half of that amount. So it affects me badly. And if I don't work with him or with her, there's no way I can feed.
Thank God for this very thing. Whatsoever we see how it is, we thank it. But the thing is too high. Only see we are just going to manage our life because of business, how children will eat. You get me back? But nothing we can do. As far as we get the product, we thank God.
Even the many people are in short. I'm already weak about the situation. I don't know what I will say about it. But what can we do? We are going to follow them now anyway where they do not because we don't have power. The power belongs to them.
So our leaders they don't need us to grow.
All right, welcome back. Dr. Andrew Nevin is back with us now, former chief economist of PwC Nigeria. Doctor, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Nancy. I'm sorry. We all know technology can fail us.
Exactly, exactly. Did you hear my question earlier as to...
Yeah.
Okay, so please respond.
Well, I mean, I think we all understand the reasons for the Japa Syndrome. And we wrote the paper when I was with PwC back before the pandemic around, in fact, the size of the diaspora remittances, which were becoming huge and people didn't notice. They continued to talk about oil being the largest export. And we simply said, brains are the largest export. But as you rightly say, so that's not necessarily a bad thing. But the scale of loss of human capital is concerning. And of course, I think from my perspective, it's always been a bit of a litmus test on how well the government, how well the state is doing in keeping people. I mean, people are leaving for a reason. If you look historically over the decades, over a long period of time, about 3% of people live in a country that's not where they were born. So it's not, most people, 97% of people stay in the country where they're born. And that's been very constant across countries, constant across the decades where we have records on that. Why? I mean, some people are adventurous. They want to try new things. But not everyone wants to. But in Nigeria, we all know the challenges and hardships we faced. And it's a very harsh environment. And I can tell you I'm a Canadian, so a lot of people come to talk to me about Japa to Canada. It's been increasing. Of course, Canada is the world's largest immigrant country by a percentage of the number of immigrants we take relative to the population. So I think this year in Canada, we are going to take about 500,000 people. I think Nigeria may be now the third or fourth source for immigrants, so it's becoming quite massive. But why are we taking people, or the UK taking people, or the US or Germany? These countries are taking people because, of course, their workforce is aging, so they desperately.
Okay, seems that technology has played its own bit there again, where Doctor was saying because the workforce in Canada and UK are aging, and if you definitely know, Nigeria has a youthful population. All right, let's quickly take a break and see if we can reconnect with Dr. Nevin again. This technology should not play fast one on us today. Let's go on a break. All right, welcome back, Dr. Nevin. We're so sorry for that. The network is really not friendly at this morning. Anyway, Dr. Nevin, can you hear me now?
Near you, Nancy. Let's try one more time. We'll see if we can
Yes,
make this one.
we can make this one work. You did mention earlier that because countries are having aging population, so a lot more countries are welcoming younger people. But the question is, why are Nigerians living in droves? Is it just only about the economic challenges? Because almost all countries around the world have economic challenges. It's just a matter of degree and a matter of how the government attend to those challenges. In the UK, for example, there's inflation, there's a cost of living crisis. In Canada, too, you have your own issues there. So why do you think that Nigerians are living in droves? Is it just about the economic challenge, or is it that they don't see any hope that things will get better?
Well, I think lots of people like myself, I'm very optimistic, and I have a lot of confidence that Nigeria is going to improve. But let me make it very specific in the Canadian context. I think a lot of what drives it is if you think about your day-to-day challenges in Nigeria, if you have children, so you've got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, or a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. I mean, it's hard. You worry about obviously power, you worry about education, you worry about health, you worry about security. If you jap to Canada, you may not get as good a job, but the reality is that your healthcare is now free. It's not perfect. We have waiting lists in Canada, but if you have a medical problem, it will get attended to. You can trust that the doctor and the nurse is doing what's in your best interest. You can trust that the pharmaceutical supply chain is robust, and if you take a medicine, it's what you paid for. So all of a sudden, and of course, it's totally free in our socialized system in Canada. In terms of education, you now have very high quality education that's for free. So, and of course, the level of security in the United Kingdom or in Canada is much higher than at least the perceived level of security is much higher. So from that viewpoint, I can perfectly understand why a family would choose to say, look, it's just going to make even if I have to take a step back in my career, because let's be honest, Canada doesn't do a very good job with immigrants in terms of placing them at the same level they were at in Nigeria. Often when they leave to Canada, they drop down a level, 2 levels, 3 levels. But I think what people are saying is, I understand I'm going to drop down a level or two, but I also understand I'm worried about my children's future. They're going to be in a secure environment. They're going to have access to healthcare. They're going to have access to high quality education for free. So the only thing that you, from a financial viewpoint, have to provide is housing and food. And if you can manage to make enough money to do those two things, you're at least going to be providing those things, the health and education for your children. So that's a lot of what's driving it in my experience talking to young Nigerians that are jumping to Canada.
Doctor, do you think that with what you've seen with the new administration, because with what has been brought upon us with because of these new policies, petrol subsidy removal, FX unification, and some other things that just these two policies affected, transportation cost, cost of living crisis right now in Nigeria, do you think that as a result of these that we will see more families and more Nigerians not seeing hope on the horizon and decide to Japa?
Well, I mean, when I was at PwC and along with many other commentators, I mean, we made the point. I mean, the foil subsidy had to go. We were subsidizing other countries. We were subsidizing corruption and diversion. There was some benefit to individuals in Nigeria, but it didn't outweigh the disadvantages of the cost of corruption on that. And similarly, the exchange rate. I mean, there were some privileged actors that got access to the exchange rate at 411 or 480. But it wasn't actually helping the economy. I think it's up to the government now to take some other steps to make sure that the economy starts to improve. Because you're exactly right. If we don't see an improvement in the economy, then people are going to continue to jap. And what's happening, of course, is remember when someone japas, they've had, at least in the Canadian context, they've had an application in for a year or two. So the ones leaving now started this process 1 or 2 years ago, or sometimes 3 years ago now. So the people who are now thinking about starting the process are making a decision on what they see is happening in Nigeria. If they see a turnaround, we'll see a slowdown in the JAPA applications. If we don't see a turnaround, we're going to see an increase in the JAPA applications, which is logical. But I mean, one issue that the government really, I think, clearly has to confront is Nigerians have said, you take our resources and you do not use them wisely. If we go back to when I arrived in the country, there was effectively no taxation. The government paid for itself through the tax revenue. So there was a very simple social contract. Government's not going to ask for anything. We're not going to give you anything. So you do your own education, your own healthcare, your own security. your own power, your own infrastructure. That equation has been changing because now the government is demanding tax revenue. In fact, there are some parties out there that want to, they use the term revenue mobilization. But what the federal government in particular has not shown is it can use these resources wisely. So we have the money going to Ajacuza Steel. We have the 3 refiners that don't produce any refined product. We have the airport in Lagos, the $100 million airport built by the Chinese, the international terminal that's not being used. Many examples, and of course, the very expensive cost of governance, including the multiplicity of MDAs. So I think as Nigerians look at this, if they don't see some progress in some of these dimensions, the Japa syndrome is only going to increase.
Do you think that perhaps this government realizes the import of some of the effects that this will bring, the economic challenges that we're having right now? Do you think that this government realizes that many Nigerians and the people that are really living are perhaps even those that were categorized as middle class? So two questions in one now. Do you think that this government realizes that this is an issue that needs to be addressed? And are you worried that Nigeria's supposed middle class are the ones living?
Well, I mean, I do think the government's very aware that the Japa syndrome is a litmus test of how good governance is, how good the situation is for all Nigerians, but as you say, particularly for the middle class. So I think they understand that, and I think they should take the level of Japaing, if I can use that term, as a measurement of if they're making progress. I mean, we know there've been times, even when I've been in the country, there's been flows of people back to Nigeria when they feel like the situation is going to improve. So if you go back to 2010, 2011, there was a big flow back of people that had JAP and it came back when they see opportunities. So I think the government should use this as a metric. I mean, we always talk about these key performance indicators. Let's use the Japa syndrome, the Japa numbers as a metric for the government. Are you doing a good job? Because if people seeing you're doing a good job, that's going to make life better for Nigerians. People see more opportunities. They want to be a doctor here. They want to start their business here. Then we're going to see the amount of Japa reduce or even reverse, as I said on that. So I think we should start tracking that. But unless there's enough signals that people don't believe the economy or the social situation or the security situation is going to improve, the Japa syndrome is only going to get worse. And I think you highlighted earlier in the show, particularly in the healthcare field. I mean, it takes many years to create a doctor. So if we lose a doctor, it's not easily replaceable. It takes many years to create a nurse. We lose a nurse, it's not easily replaceable. So these are really critical issues for the healthcare sector in particular.
Which other sectors do you think are at risk of losing the highly skilled, apart from the health sector, the doctors, the nurses, perhaps the radiographers, or those even in the medical field? Which other sectors are losing skills and droves?
Well, of course, I retired recently from PwC, so I can say that from the viewpoint of the professional services firms, it's a real issue. I mean, it's a huge amount of attrition. We get to, I won't say we because I'm retired now, but that the professional services firms, so the big four and the strategic houses lose their people abroad. Also, of course, when I was at PwC, I wasn't only the chief economist. I oversaw the financial services sector. So all of the banks are my clients, were my clients, and they're having a really difficult time because the people who are highly skilled, they've been trained well, and many of the banks have excellent graduate trainee programs, and those people are going. So in addition to the healthcare sector, we're seeing it in professional services, and we're certainly seeing it in the financial sector.
Mm. I like that you talked about financial sector because for me personally, for the bank I bank with, in fact, two banks that I have accounts with, my account officers in the last 2 years have all left the country. And when I mean I have an account officer, he leaves, another one comes in, he leaves, another one comes in, he leaves. So I've had three account officers in one bank leave and two account officers in another bank leave. So I'm like, okay, who's my account officer? I'm like being introduced to another person. Not too long again, the person leaves. So the financial services. What do you think will be the risk of these skills leaving? What are the risks right now that Nigeria is facing as an economy that perhaps we have not yet realized?
Well, I mean, I think there is a big risk. I mean, if we go back to prior to the new administration, I mean, we had many years where the economy was going in reverse. I've talked about it many times. The challenge, and we don't need to go through the challenges, but the reality is, if that doesn't reverse itself, it's not where the country's going to end up is uncertain. So, I mean, I was always positive and optimistic about Nigeria because I saw many things happening on the ground. I believe that the new administration has done some correct things at the opening. I mean, as I said, there are many more things they need to do, but I continue to be optimistic. But I don't want to say it's a crisis, but I do think it's urgent that there's enough improvement that the Japa syndrome can be slowed down. But the other part, of course, of the Japa, I mean, remember, we still get this benefit from people abroad in terms of the remittances, and but not just the remittances, the connectivity to the world. So India has benefited enormously from having very powerful diaspora building over the last 30 years. And of course, you see many of the world's global companies like Google that are run by people of Indian origin now. So it can be a very powerful force over the next few decades for Nigeria, and we believe in the powerful force. But as you say, if it's too fast right now, it's going to cripple us here at home in Nigeria. So I think that the other thing the government needs to do is we just need to educate more young people. I mean, if we're going to lose a certain amount abroad, but we're going to benefit at least economically from that by sending remittances. If we have 1,000 nurses that we're training, if we're going to lose 500 of them, we need to train 1,500 nurses. And I think those are things that we should be talking to our development partners in our developed countries like Canada. You know, how do we train enough nurses so we know we're going to lose a certain amount and get the economic benefit? But the other thing that of course, PwC put out a paper just last year, which to me was the most important paper that I was involved with in my 15 years in Nigeria, which is about the fact that actually more and more work can be done remotely. So one of the counterforces, the Japa syndrome, of course, is people doing jobs for companies abroad or global value chains abroad but remaining in Nigeria. And this is accelerating at a very rapid rate. I asked someone who's involved in this industry, and I won't name the person because I don't have any verification of these numbers, but I asked how many people in Nigeria are involved in global value chains. So sit in Nigeria, but work in a global value chain. So they didn't have to Japa to earn dollars on that. And this individual told me, who's very knowledgeable, that he thought that it was 100,000 people 5 years ago, and now it's 300,000. So you can see from the viewpoint of the economy, if we have more and more Nigerians who can still have some of the benefits of japping, that is earning FX, but remaining in Nigeria, that could be very powerful. But of course, you know, the one issue in that is security, because people, if we don't improve the security situation, people aren't necessarily going to be swayed totally by economics. They're going to be swayed by security, and the Japa syndrome will increase.
Mm. Yeah, I will come back to the issue of global value chains integration later, but let's talk about the issue of remittance, which you talked about, and you gave a good example of India. But, Doctor, I would like you to take a look at this scenario for Nigerians that have left at least in the last 2 to 3 years, or even between the last 5 years and now. You will agree with me that even before people start sending money home, they will have a sense of balance and a sense of stability abroad before they start sending that remittance home. And the remittances we've seen so far in Nigeria are remittances that are really, related to personal remittances, like personal uses, so to speak. Okay, give my mother $100, go take $200, or take this $1,000. Let's start building a house in the village and all of that. So how can you really quantify that as to reducing perhaps extreme poverty in Nigeria? That's one. Then number two, for the people that have left, there's also time lag there, because we as a country, we would also lose like 3, 4, 5, 6 years or even 10 years before we start getting remittances into the country. And come to think of it, the remittances have also dwindled in the last 1 year or two.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. There's a time lag here. So someone
Yeah.
who goes abroad, either for education or even if they're starting a job, they're not going to have a remittance immediately. So you're right. In the short term, there's a hit. But I mean, I think what's happened is there's been enough years of the diaspora, Nigerian diaspora, let's call it global Nigeria, growing, and now that number is very big. And the remittance number, I think, is about $25 billion. That's the official remittance number. Of course, the total remittance number is much bigger because there's a huge amount of unofficial remittances. So, for example, if you're a student in Canada, what's happening in a lot of cases is the student is getting the Canadian dollars from a Nigerian diaspora member in Canada working, because then the student's parents in Nigeria send naira to the Canadian worker's mother in the village, for example, and that happens to the tune of billions of dollars at least, but we're not very good at measuring that. So the absolute remittances are bigger than the 25 billion official number. But your point is exactly right. It's a long-term investment, and it's not ideal. In the short term, it does have a hit on the economy.
Mm. Okay, if we take a look at this brain drain, how do you think that Nigeria, what are your recommendations that Nigeria can quickly take to reverse this brain drain into brain gain? Because if you take a
Well,
look at even India, India, they've been sending remittances home, and India has also been exporting brains outside that you see that majority of their people are heads of global organizations. Indians, diasporans that are Indians are also coming back home to do quite a lot. Their healthcare system improving, even their education and all of that. So how can Nigeria turn this brain drain into brain gain?
well, I mean, I think the number one issue is, I mean, is the economy, but particularly the security issue. And we've said for probably a year now, actually, the security is the number one thing preventing the economy, particularly the agricultural economy, but affects the overall economy. If we were more secure, I mean, India has done a fantastic job, as you say, of turning brain drain because they were worried about it in the early 1990s. They now understood, of course, as you said. I mean, they have this powerful diaspora, and not only that, but they have diaspora coming back, and not only that, they now have young people that say we don't even need to be members of the diaspora. We can work for Microsoft in Bangalore, have a global job, earn good money. We can be with our families in India. So they've found that sweet spot in many cases with that. And of course, they export $200 billion worth of services. So from the viewpoint of Nigeria, that's kind of where we want to head on that. We're down, the path is starting anyway, but the things that would allow that to happen are the things that would improve life for all Nigerians. Number one thing being security. It would be very helpful if we stabilized in the short term the exchange rate, and the biggest impact, the biggest way to do that is in fact to increase the production of hydrocarbons. I mean, the reason that we have an 800 naira to the dollar exchange rate right now is because of the collapse in hydrocarbon production from about 1.7 back in 2013, or even 2 in some months, down to as low as 1.0, 1.2 at the present time. Those things would make a big difference to helping people stay here. But the thing that would probably make as much a difference as well is simply more education. I mean, why would we allow an ASU strike for 8 months? We have an entire hundreds of thousands of young Nigerians lose an entire year and discouraged lose an entire year of university. That impact on our human capital is immense on that. Why would we put money into a steel mill that will never work and in Ajaokuta Steel rather than invest in educating young Nigerians? Because I said the world needs to employ them. I mean, the model I put before, for example, with the nurses is rather than train 1,000 nurses, train 1,500 or 2,000 and recognize 500 will go away. So increasing our investments, taking money that's used unproductively for consumption, like the foil subsidy, or just simply wasted like Ajaokuta Steel, or as it seems like the refineries, because it's not clear to me the refineries will ever work. If we repurpose that money and put it more into the education of young Nigerians, whether they're going to use their skills here as the environment improves or use them abroad, either way benefits Nigeria on that. So that would be the number one policy recommendation that I would make.
Now, let me go back to global value chains. How do you think that, or what do you think we can do to be able to integrate Nigeria, more Nigerians into the global value chains, perhaps remotely here in Nigeria without traveling? Because we do know that there are opportunities there for Nigerians to take advantage of right here. They may be working here, but they are also earning foreign currency that will have a direct impact on the country. And which sectors do you think that can give us that very quickly? Then the third part is how can we actually also evenly distribute those remote work across global value chains across the country. So it's not just about Lagos, it's not about Abuja, for example. How can the government also begin to look at an equitable distribution across the country?
No, absolutely right. And just to put some numbers on it, if you take software development, there's about 28 or 29 million software developers in the world. The number is going to 45 million, whether or not we have AI, and a big percentage of the new ones should be coming from Nigeria because we have a big percentage of the young people. I mean, the first thing about these global value chains is in many cases, like in software development, the young people train themselves. So we don't necessarily need a big push by the government to be the ones educating. But what we need are access to a few critical things. One is bandwidth. So the policies around telecoms, I mean, 33 separate taxes on telecom companies needs to be examined. If we want to grow the digital economy, insertion to the global value chains, we need to make it easier to join them. Similarly with power. Now, you don't need industrial scale power to be able to join the global value chain, but you need power that's there all the time. It's largely driven by solar. So those two things would really go a long way to help it. And as you said, Nancy, it's actually very critical. It's around the country. So Outsource Global, of course, is Nigeria's most successful outsourcing company. It's got at least 1,500 people in northern Nigeria, in Abuja and Kaduna. It was started by the national heroine, Amal Hassan. It does business process outsourcing, software development, legal services, accounting services, call centers, other back office practices. They're growing fast. Now, what's very exciting about them is they're in Kaduna, but they're also, I understand, going to be opening soon in Gombe, we hope, on that. And that illustrates exactly what you said, is these global value chains can impact all states, not just about Abuja, it's not just about Lagos. The Edo State Governor, His Excellency Governor Obaseki, has made this a flagship of his program. I think he's aiming for 35,000 programmers, software developers, and global value chains. That's already started, so it's not just a what do I want to say? It's not just a plan, it's actually being executed, and the young people working in those global value chains. Equity State has done the same thing. So I think it's something that individual governors should really, not necessarily the federal government, individual governors should be keying into, and more of them are. The other place from a policy viewpoint, of course, that's the center of all this is NIDDA in Abuja. I know they have been paying careful attention to these global value chains. I think one thing that would make a big difference is if there was more outreach from Nigeria directly to the big companies like Microsoft, Google, Apple. Come here, get 100 people, 50 people, try it out. You'll see that it's really good value for you and grow it. And Microsoft, of course, has a very large and growing office in Ikoyi in Lagos. I'd like to see them move across the country, but I think that's an area where engagement from the federal government to make it welcoming.
Okay.
Of course, it's also important to people to be able to visit easily. So the usual things around ease of doing business and easy arrival and business visas as well to
Okay.
support that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Nevin, for joining us and lending your insights to this problem which we have right now in Nigeria. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
joining.
Nancy. Have a great day.
You too. I'll be speaking with Dr. Andrew Nevin, who is the former chief economist at PricewaterhouseCoopers Nigeria. That's PwC. And that's the much we can take on today's edition of the program. It's Japa Syndrome we've taken a look at today. Perhaps Andrew's checking out 2.0. But for those that can't even check out, Nigerian government should be able to make this place habitable for us. I am Nancy Naji. Have a good day. I'll see you all again tomorrow. Be the best you can be the change you want to see.
Nigeria can survive if our leaders do them best. Oh, Andrew go straight to help. Oh, Nigeria